Back in March, I made a video about typography trends of 2021, and a lot of those typography trends have been seen throughout this year. We have things like outline text and disruptive typography, and they've been throughout this year. We have things like outline text and disruptive typography, and they've been found all over the design world. But what can we expect to see in the new year in terms of typography trends? Well, let's take a look and see what we've got to play with. And later in today's video, you can learn about the awesome design tool that helps you create sleek, modern and nifty websites. It's ReadyMag, the design tool that's built right into your browser. ReadyMag is offering you guys, the Satori viewers, a great promotion, so learn more about that later in today's video. So, after doing a lot of research and with my ear firmly to the ground, it seems there is a huge potential for 4 specific styles of typography to really take off in a big way next year. The first one being the use of really wide and stretched typography that kind of appears short in nature. This has already started to make an appearance this year, but it really could take a hold in 2022. This style of typography is often created using modern sans serif fonts, and it's this style of typography Is often created using modern sans serif fonts and is presented in uppercase letter forms. It works really well with short phrases or words, and it really does come across as modern and trendy. There are specific fonts that carry this style naturally, two of which are Neutro and also Vlanella Bold. Now, I don't suggest that you manually stretch your typography because that kind of distorts the style of the typeface. Rather, it's best to seek out fonts such as Vlanella and Neutro if you really want to make use of this trend. The next possible trend to take off is one that is used by designers who work on magazine covers, and that is to obscure the full word or phrase with an object in the foreground. And this is often seen on the title or the name of a magazine, and then the model usually hides part of the lettering with their form. However, this is now spilling over into the greater design community, and it's becoming a very popular design method. This technique often shows that the brand or the company is recognizable just by the style of the font alone, without being able to read the letters. And Vogue is a magazine that has done this over and over again throughout history. The technique shows how well and established Vogue is, because people recognize it without being able to read the actual words. But yeah, this is now moving over to the design world as a whole. And something else that designers are utilizing is cutting off parts of the word to the left or to the right. That designers are utilizing is cutting off parts of the word to the left or to the right of the design. Again, this is a playful tactic that can create a visually appealing design. The third trend that actually isn't going to be exclusive to next year, but likely to many years in the future, is animated typography. Now that we have so many design programs that enable us to make motion graphics, and lots of tech to easily view those graphics on, designs are becoming more and more animated and less static. This is also, of course, true to typography. This has already been shown on my channel when we look at top tier design portfolios that include animated functions and typography. It's a way to show off not only skills as a graphic designer, but to showcase how far technology has advanced in our time. When animating typography, you should always aim to include the style of animation that fits the font choice and the message of your design. It is wise to start the time frame with the font and wording already visible as a whole, and then carry out the animation thereafter. You want people to read the text at a first glance, and then to see the animation. But yeah, expect to see more and more animated typography as time goes on. Expect to see more and more animated typography as time goes on. The fourth trend that you should look for in 2022 and possibly use on your design work, when the time is right of course, is outline typography. Yes, this has been trending this year and I did talk about it in March, but it's likely going to carry over into the next year and dominate the graphic design world. It's been seen in adverts on TV, TV shows, magazines, pretty much everywhere. This technique is often done with bold sans serif fonts and in uppercase letters. Designers will pair outline typography with filled typography of the same font, and this creates some contrast and hierarchy. Yeah, it's super easy to do, and in the right context, it can look awesome. But that is the important thing to easy to do. And in the right context, it can look awesome. But that is the important thing to consider with every method or technique. Your research and the brief should let you know if it's valid or not to be used. Often your design won't work or function by using any of these techniques because the brief doesn't align with it. Imagine an easy to use drag and drop editor for creating your website align with it. Imagine an easy to use drag and drop editor for creating your websites, something built directly into your browser. Well, that's the sponsor of today's video, ReadyMag. Now, it couldn't be easier to use, and for someone like myself who hasn't even bothered to learn code, it's a great asset in my design arsenal. You all know how I feel about fonts and typography. I really cannot get enough of them. And so when I realised that ReadyMag has an ever-growing collection of over 5,000 web fonts from places like Typekit, WebType, Google and so on, I had to take a closer look at this design tool. I also took a closer look at some of the existing designs created with ReadyMag, which you can do as well for inspiration on their examples page. And if you build websites for clients, then you can turn project pages into templates and reuse them to speed up your workflow. And clients can even check your project via a password-protected link using ReadyMag. Or alternatively, you can use the collaboration function that allows you to invite other people onto your projects to work together.
Please mind the gap. 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 Please mind the gap.
Hey everybody, Chris here. A lot of people have been asking, how do you give art direction to designers? How do you do it in a way that moving them out so that they post more? So I want to just take a moment to explain to people who are watching what's going on. Min is helping me out with designing a new newspaper for one of our initiatives. Right now we're just playing around with the title Thirst, and so that's the masthead. And so we'll look at some of the topography. She's been working on this for some time, so we got a lot of layouts to look at. All right, so let's take a look at the layout here. This is a very clean layout. You're using Futura right there. I like Futura. It's part of the identity we've been using. It's really nice clean layout. Good use of like a bold headline, subhead, and body copy, and a byline right there. What I don't love right now is the way the thirst is in there. It's kind of at an angle, and it's not quite working for me. Okay, let's take a look at your next one. Oh, wow. Okay, this one's really nice. I love the way that you cut off the T's on the lowercase Futura typeset. And I like the I, the way you cut that off, and it matches nicely with the cap height. The thing I don't love is the way the S is chopped off at the bottom. It feels like there's a flat spot there. But things that are working really well are, we got nice table of contents set up here. Great kind of bold numeral there, and I like that. And when you're doing some modern layouts like this, I don't think you want to center your type. I much prefer justified left type. And so if you do that, I think this is going to look a lot better. I don't love this little bit overlapping this because I think it's going to be hard to read, but it doesn't need to be overlapping there. So I would just pull that. That down there. And lastly, I see a couple things here. There's and this is legal. So that space, I think you would have a little bit more wiggle room or forgiveness in the layout.
Are you someone who's passionate about typography? Maybe you would like to test your knowledge of how your typography is in graphic design and see where your skills or your weaknesses currently are. If that's the case, then today's before and after style video will appeal to you a whole lot. So let's get right into it, guys. There is 8 different editions in today's video, and try and see how many of those 8 you can get right. For the first one, we have a fairly simple and clean layout design, but when considering the typography, there is one key main issue. Now, it might be subtle to some people, but that is what these videos are all about. It's teaching the fact that sometimes a subtle problem can be a big thing. Let's take a closer look to see what's actually going on here, and just think to yourself, what would you change in terms of the typography on this design? So if you guess that the leading on the body text was too tightly packed together, then you are correct. Leading, aka the spacing between each line, is very important to get right, and that's so the viewer can read the text clearly, but also so that the design as a whole doesn't look cramped or messy. Having leading that is too wide apart can also be an issue. Here's another somewhat simple design, but just remember we are thinking about the typography. What makes you feel uncomfortable when looking at the typography on this design, and what would you change? Now again, this one might be something not so obvious to many people, but when we see the following change soon, it's probably going to be obvious that the change was needed. So let's go ahead and reveal that change in the typography. Now on the first design, the typography was centered, but considering the image content, having the text in the center just didn't work. It doesn't make sense. Now why is that, do you think? Well, because the design needs to have balance to work visually, and so having the text in the upper left helps to achieve that. This also could be seen as the design principle of proximity. Now here's a poster design advertising a specific night at a club. Now here's a poster design advertising a specific night at a club, and there is one change that needs to be applied to multiple areas of the design in terms of the typography. So to clarify, we're looking for one issue that has been made in different areas of the design, but can you work out what that problem is? So let's reveal that change and see what has been done to the new design. It is the fact that the first design failed to make use of contrast in the typography. Now contrast emphasizes certain things, and also it just makes the design look neater and more visually appealing. Yes, on the second design, the text underneath Sept in the upper left corner is somewhat blurry, but that's just a video render from my screen recording software. If this design was printed out, then it would look just fine. Design number 4 has a pretty major typography offense, but can you see what it is? Now this one probably jumps out to most people immediately, and it is there glaring you right in the face right now when you're looking at it. So here's the change, and the issue in the first design was the line length. The length of a body text line needs to be well thought out, and it shouldn't be too short or too long in comparison to the design. This will change on different designs and it is relative. But also on the first design, the text was almost touching the design elements on the right, which just doesn't look good. Now the fifth example today is something a little bit different, and I do have 3 of these questions coming up. But on this letter I, what are the yellow additions called at the top and the bottom of a character? Now this one should be obvious, and of course they are called serifs. I'm sure most of you know this, but what about the next one? Can you guess what the next technical term is? So if the previous example was serif, what would you call the orangey yellow addition on the letter R here? Well, I'm going to put you out of your misery, and this one is called a bool terminal. And of course, they are only seen on specific style of fonts. Now I could go through many of these technical terms, but that's not for today's video. However, we do have one more technical question. What are these 2 lines called at the top and the bottom of this text? They are a specific typography technical term, and see if you can get both of them right here. And after this question, we have one final before and after example for us to look at. So the bottom line here is called the baseline, and then the top line is called the cap line or cap height. So kudos to you if you've got these technical terms right. So the final question for today's video is, what would you change about the typography on this design? There is something that again for some people is probably sticking out like a sore thumb, but what would you change about this design? Well, of course, the text here has been aligned centrally when in fact it probably should be aligned to the left. Sometimes aligning text centrally is okay, but most of the time aligning to the left will be the better choice. So yeah, there was today's video of before and after content and typography, and do let me know if you want to see more videos just like today's. I often read comments on my channel about how to become a better designer or how to succeed in this industry. Although there are many different factors to becoming a superhuman master level designer, and spoiler alert, I'm not quite there yet myself, there is one thing that if you understand and master, your designs will be elevated to new heights. Now can you guess what that one thing is? What should you be mastering? Now this video is not a trick and it's not some kind of clickbait, because mastering this one side of design truly made me understand how to design more efficiently, and it gained me more clients in the long run. Now I am of course referring to the principles of graphic design. These are the fundamental basics that you need to not only be aware of, and not only should you understand them, but you really should master them and consider them every single time you're working on a design. So follow along with today's video and learn why that's the case, and do yourself a favor by truly understanding and embracing the fundamentals of design. So very briefly, what are the design principles? There is no set in stone number of how many principles there are, but here are 12 that often come up when talking about this topic. So we have balance in graphic design, we have contrast, hierarchy, which is one of my most widely used principles. We have emphasis, proximity, repetition, rhythm, white space, pattern, movement, alignment, and unity. There are a few secondary principles as well, and these include things like typography and color. Now these should be the building blocks to any of your design projects. And no, they're not just some random theory, they actually do work, and if you fully understand them, they will truly enhance your design solutions in more efficiency. Now it is entirely possible to create a good design without even thinking about the design principles. However, this is typically done by a designer's intuition, and it's going to require a lot of trial and error in order to create something that actually looks good and creates an optimum, because its opposed sprinkled into your design process removes any kind of trial and error. Trial and error doesn't guarantee you a possible. What project board needs some of these unwritten quick examples. That is an AC now goes on to the to take the advert campaign. What their artwork. Now let's take a look at this Nike advert campaign.